We've talked a lot in past episodes about how New York has barred natural gas pipelines and how this has cut off the Northeast from natural gas supply. But there's actually another blockade going on, and this is from something called the Jones Act. And that's a protectionist law. It's about a century old that it demands that cargo that's transported between U.S. ports has to be on U.S. built ships, and the crew has to be an American crew. And the problem, or at least one problem with that, is that there aren't enough of these ships that comply with the law in order for us to get liquefied natural gas from the American South to the Northeast to help deal with the fact that they don't have pipeline capacity to bring in natural gas. And Massachusetts, in order to get around this, actually had to import natural gas from, would you believe it, Russia instead of the United States, which is just this like haven of natural gas. And for a while, it was looking like President Trump was considering waiving the Jones Act, but reportedly has changed his mind, although there's nothing official on it. And there's this concept that economists will talk about called Baptists and bootleggers. And it's that you can often get a unity or a unified front between people who are ideologically opposed or committed to something, and then people who just want to cash in. So, for instance, this is the deprivation of natural gas to the Northeast is you have the green movement that just wants to stop energy, but then you have these crony businessmen in the U.S. shipping world who, in order to protect their prices without having to compete, are holding back our ability to deliver energy, and that it's very hard to overcome that in a situation in which people aren't concerned with freedom, and instead you get these different pressure groups vying for their special restrictions or special favors. And so I think this is I would like to see this waived, but I think more importantly, just having a more broader commitment to freedom so that you're not having to fight these fights in this kind of piecemeal fashion is going to become very vital, because the Northeast is really suffering. They're very vulnerable, particularly we might have time to talk about grid resiliency. They're very vulnerable right now, and a bad winter along with some pipelines breaking down could be really catastrophic. And I think the important long-term game here is to protect their freedom to actually get the energy that they need.
I had never heard that term, Baptists and bootleggers. That is, I mean, that I think applies very, very broadly, in that you have people with certain very strong ideology, particularly, in the case of the Greens, we're talking about something that's anti-industrial, but maybe more relevant is statist. So it necessitates power concentrated in the hands of the government, and then that's always going to invite corrupt people who want to use that power for their own gain. And so the one of the obvious kinds of uses of the power will be to take resources from some people and give them to other people, or restrict some people's freedom in a way that at least somewhat benefits other people, and thus you'll get all of this manipulation. But so one aspect of this that I want to highlight is that I think often the Baptist part of it comes first. That is, the ideology creates a context where it's considered moral for the government to gain a whole bunch of power, and then there are opportunists who will try to do their best to exploit that. But it's when sometimes people just say, "Oh, it's money and it's corruption." But one of the questions is, what ideas made possible that corruption? What gave a moral sanction to that corruption, and really what gave a moral sanction to the power that then the corruption inevitably flows from?
Yeah, well, and one other point to that, because I agree with that 100%. But the other thing is, I think there's a tendency to think that there are no Baptists. In other words, like often I think critics of the Green Movement will portray them as, oh, Al Gore's just trying to get a lot of money from this global warming scam or something like that. But that I think the fact is that, like, what it really does is it prevents you from showing the destructiveness and ultimately the evil of bad ideologies if you just dismiss them as, oh, they're always just an insincere cover up for money making. Like I think like there are people who really do not value human flourishing, and if you don't recognize that and address that as a premise, then you're not going to be able to actually get anywhere.
Yeah, there's a good lecture by Leonard Peikoff, who's the heir of Ayn Rand and was her top student, and is a philosopher, still alive. And he had a lecture called the Role of Philosophy and Psychology in History. And one thing he dealt with is what's the relationship between different ideas and different motives. So I don't know if that's available in a book anywhere, but if you look up the role of philosophy and psychology in history, I'm sure you can at least listen to it somewhere for very cheap
It's online for
or
free,
free.
Alex. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.